Hey guys, welcome back to Solo Leveling Arise. In today's video, we're going to be going through the weapon tier list for the game. Now, we've got another special guest on this one, and that is Giku. Now, go over, show this man some love. If you played Black Clover, I know you already support him, but if you haven't, then go show this man some love. He's been making some great content for the game, sweated super hard, just like Painblade did in the previous video that we made. And we're going to go through this weapon tier list, give our thoughts on our progression with them. Now, Giku was the main one involved in helping create this tier list over on Pridewin. So once again, massive shout out to Pridewin and Giku for that. I think that's everything I wanted to cover. Giku, how you going, man?
I'm doing good. But yeah, it was me for Pridewin, but also for sure for O2. He was going crazy, especially for the weapon tier list. So, big shout outs to the solo leveling team that they have, especially Antelar. It seems like it takes a while with how much stuff there is in solo leveling to implement it into a database is insane.
Yeah, it is super complex because there's so many different stuff, like even just data entry for each character. When you look at what they have, it's massive. But I'm glad they ended up deciding to support the game because
for sure,
I'm playing it, so I want a good database.
Exactly.
But
I like how Pridewin looks, so it's definitely good to have
they're very well presented. So let's get into it. Let's kick it off with we'll go like right through maybe the top 3 tiers, and then we'll just do like a speed round for the bottom ones because they don't matter as much. But we'll kick it off with the Plum Flower Sword. Now, this is one I love because I had it at 1 dupe in my Canadian free-to-play account. And this thing is just an absolute monster. I think... I personally recommend this as being like the best weapon to have on your wish list to go ahead and get as your first weapon. Would you agree with that?
I would. And what's funny is I think this is the only weapon that had a whole like guide graphic made of if you have it, build Jinwoo a certain way, and if you don't, build Jinwoo another way. Plum is just insane. And even late game, I think for showcases, stuff like that, it just supports other weapons extremely well. And also, if you want to build like a mono dark team with like the scythe, because you have 2 dupes of the scythe with challenges, stuff like that, Plum just works extremely well. And I mean, S plus just makes sense, right?
And the thing with it is it's not just this raw damage output, but it's also the way it plays. It's a sword, but it kind of has range on it, and it's also semi AoE as well. And it's just so comfortable to play with and just reliable in any situation. It does have some unique things to it, like before you switch to it, you do want to use a dodge beforehand because then it casts it quicker. You get bonuses and stuff like that. But that's about it for the complexity. Just before you switch to it, by using the what is it, F4C, whatever weapon slot it's in. You just want to dodge so you get that buff, and that's about it for complexity. It's just a fantastic weapon in general. Like you said, you've got the scythe as well for people, but eventually if you get Moonshadow as well, that's more of a dark weapon buffer, and that becomes like...
Moonshadow's good.
Yeah, that would become like your end game combo for Dark Jinwoo, where you just basically slap everything as much as possible. But yeah, Plume's sick. Now the Huntsman, I understand how this one works, but I'll let you go through it because I didn't have too much hands-on with it.
Huntsman for me, I mean, especially early game, the main thing that was very good about it was the break, right? I mean, especially because there was a lot of light disadvantage. Well, you were type advantage a lot of the time with the Huntsman in story, so it offers a lot from that. But the main thing is with that break. Now it does seem they changed it a bit, the attack, like the way it works, at least for the when you press F or C depending. But I really do like it, and especially once you get it duped out, it does start becoming a lot better. Also, well, obviously the precision you get from the dupes, but mainly because of the dupe one, there's also the Sunder effect, which is, if I remember correctly, it's going to increase the damage that they take. And because it's like the only like really good light weapon, it does definitely deserve that S plus tier. But the main thing is really break and damage. That's like the main things you're getting out of it. And the breaking potential, sometimes like half the bar goes and you're just like, okay, well, GG, you win like instantly.
Yeah, and don't be fooled by it being a gun. It is a close range weapon because you get damage
so
boosts
funny,
on close range.
Plum Sword is probably longer range than the Huntsman.
True.
And it's a sword.
That's 100%
it. I don't get it. Like I use both of them, and sometimes I just wonder how Huntsman is the gun, but is closer range.
Yeah, that is so true.
I don't get it.
Moving on from that, we have the grimoire, and this is... I also had this one, and I absolutely love this weapon.
I think it's my favorite one, probably.
It's my favorite weapon, but it's more of a supportive weapon than your main damage weapon, and that's why I still prefer picking up Plum, sorry, as my first weapon because it is that main damage. Whereas the grimoire supports it. It basically what it does is when you switch to it or use the weapon ability, which is F or C depending on your formation, it's going to freeze enemies, but it's also going to put a 4-second counting debuff on them that for that 4 seconds it counts the damage that they take. And then after the 4 seconds, it deals an additional 10% damage, 10% of what they took in that period. So you can do crazy combos with something like the Plum, where you use the grimoire, you freeze them, you dodge and go straight into Plum. And if you have it at one dupe, it means you're going to get, after you do the dodge swap into it, you're going to get a big crit bonus. And then if you ult with Jinwoo off of that...
Oh, that damage would be insane.
So you essentially put this debuff on where they're taking 10% extra, and then you've done every nuke under the sun in that 4 seconds, and then they take that whole burst damage with an extra 10%, and it's a huge damage amplification. But not just that, it's also the raw control you get out of freezing enemies, and the fact that it's a safe ranged weapon.
The AoE of how big the AoE is insane, and it's like sometimes, especially for story, I think you're going to see insane value out of it, but also obviously for bosses, right? Water's really a really good element because of Lycan. It's going to be type advantage against Lycan, which is one of the like accessory bosses. But when you're like fighting like 15 enemies in a wave, especially I think for chapter 8, people are going to find insane uses before the Igris fight. When you have to fight those 2 bosses and there's like those like 20 like mobs you got to like kill.
They just keep summoning,
Yeah, and then this grimoire just is able to wipe everyone out, stun them, so you're gonna be able to do insane damage while they're stunned. I love this book so much, and like since I got it, I think I've just been constantly using it, unless I just couldn't if there was like a type disadvantage. I don't think there's like a time where you wouldn't want to use the Thetis grimoire.
Yeah, see, I was even using it during type disadvantage just because I use it as a pivot weapon. Though. So normally with other weapons, if you're using like 2 damage weapons, you can switch through them pretty periodically. But with this one, I always just use it to swap into it. But when the other weapon's on cooldown, and it's basically just for the freeze, for the damage amplification, go back to my main weapon. But yeah, it's just a good all-round weapon for just about any situation. The next one is the West Wind. I'll let you take away the West Wind. This is one that just keeps getting better with dupes.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it does seem like it got nerfed a bit in terms of the amount of damage it does on global, but still the amount of damage is insane. I think dupe 1 and like dupe 5, like dupe 1, 3, and 5 are like the big dupes, but I mean, it's really good. And what it has is the advantage of being an SR. And I think for many free-to-plays, you're going to get, obviously, more SR units. And if you get lucky and get multiple West Winds, the good thing about it is you're going to get the precision. And precision, obviously, you can only have a certain amount of precision, goes up to the 99% stat. So being able to get the precision is great from the West Wind. And then the damage it does, being able to also go through multiple enemies for that nuking damage is insane. And like using this weapon with like Plum, getting the crit from Plum, being able to do the damage here is going to be really, really good. I think West Wind, the main thing is damage, right? Just straight damage.
Especially when we look at the other wind weapon that we have, which is the Demon King's Longsword, which is more of a defensive weapon and a sort of a playstyle weapon as opposed to a raw damage weapon. That's where the West Wind really starts to shine because it provides damage above the capabilities of the SSR weapon. So it just has that spot at the moment. Like you said, once you dupe it up, especially like a max dupe West Wind versus a single copy of the King Longsword, like you're going to be clapping pretty hard.
And which is also the fact, like, because of the fact that there's those other 3 SSR weapons that are way better, having the opportunity to get Westwind alongside those, like being an SR unit, if like you're on the custom banner, right, with the 2 SSR weapons rated up, you'll still be able to get the wind weapon and to put up way more than you would the longsword. So having way more value from that.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Now into the longsword. Let me know your thoughts on this one. I played with it. I did enjoy it, but it just felt like you were sacrificing damage for a playstyle.
Yeah, I mean, I used it for a bit. I tried leveling it up because I did need a wind sword at one point, I think later on in story. So I'm like, okay, I'll use it. But it's a bit rough with the counterattacks. Sometimes it just won't work, and you have to be extremely particular in how you use it. The stun could be good, but then you got Thetis' stun, which technically is about 6 seconds considering the hit, that like how long the attack lasts, and then it's a 4-second stun.
Yep.
So like the longsword's decent enough, but damage is not too crazy. At least you can get that shield, but it's a lot better to have like a really like high damage or like high there's like a lot of stuff is happening besides just like defenses, right? For this.
Yeah. Yeah, I
stun
completely
is
agree.
like okay. And you can't always guarantee like the counter is going to work, which is the main thing, I think.
I think it's just a safe weapon.
Yeah.
And that pretty much sums up what it is. It's a safe weapon, but it's not max damage potential. Now, the next one is Moonshadow. I feel like Moonshadow is one of those ones where in the end game, it could actually rank up higher when you're trying to maximize damage. But in the early game, it's because you have such limited resources to level stuff up. It's basically competing with the Plum, which is dark, and then it's competing with the Scythe. And because you're not going to level up, which is free, and you get what is it, dupes of it free. You're not going to level up Moonshadow and Plum and Scythe. You just don't have the resources. So once you get to endgame and you're focusing on a hard dark one, then you will, because the Moonshadow, especially at one dupe, then it starts amplifying the dark damage that you deal, and that's where it gets its massive combo with Plum, which I think is probably the best. If you look at everything on a neutral damage sense, it's probably your highest damage combo that you have in the game.
I agree. So the thing is with Plum is that it works universally with every other weapon because it just increases every weapon's damage. But with Moonshadow, it only increases like dark damage, and it does put increased damage taken, right? But the thing is, you really want that dupe 1, but wanting to get 2 dupes for a weapon for it to start being really good, especially on like a mono dark team, is high investment. So like you're completely right. Waiting until more endgame, I think, is better. Plus, also, they just added another 100 pulls and challenges. So, you know, I think we're safe. I think we're safe, like, to getting Moonshadow dupe 2 late game. Especially because that dupe 1, getting it twice. But that dupe 1, increasing it from 10% dark damage to 45% from that buff is just insane. So, you probably do need that dupe 2, especially because Plum is good. So, being able to use Moonshadow with that dupe 1 will be extremely good, but we already get Scythe, and then Plum is a weapon a lot of people will go for.
Yeah, 100%. It just suffers from having so much dark exposure, but
Exactly.
Also, apologies if you hear my dog and my kids. They're just going bloody nuts at the moment, so I do apologize.
You're good.
Next up is the Orb. Now, the Orb I never used. I feel like Fire is in a weird spot because the old Vulcan's Rage
just ain't it.
It just ain't it. And I don't want to invest into the Orb either. So against enemies that are weak to fire, I kind of just sacrifice and go neutral damage. And I'm kind of just waiting for a new option. But it's kind of falls up there because it is the best option. But once again, it's not something that I want to invest in with such limited resources.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're kind of lucky because I think story is important, right? I keep on bringing it up, but you don't see fire like type advantage a lot. Like you don't need it for that at least. So I think early game grinding, being able to like progress, because obviously story is very important, especially up to like chapter 8 getting shadows. You don't need the Orb of Avarice, right? But damage wise, very good. It's just lucky at the moment with having no good SSR fire, but I haven't really been struggling without a fire SSR. Or like a fire weapon in general.
Yeah.
It's good. I think for a lot of free-to-play players, it's going to be a very good option, but I don't think it's like needed, I think is the way like I go about it.
Yeah, the way I look at it as free to play, like hopefully you'll have at least a West Wind early on. If not, you pull another weapon. So West Wind would be, in that case, West Wind would be one of your weapons. Then if you don't pull anything until you unlock your first free Scythe, it's kind of West Wind and Scythe is kind of like the safest path of investment that I look to.
For sure.
But ideally, hopefully you pull another weapon. Like you get so many pulls, you'd be unlucky not to pull a weapon, especially if you have like 2 and 2 on your wish list with 2 characters and 2 weapons. And that's why I kind of avoid the Orb unless you're like looking at leveling it up to 20 in like the first day of the game. Like that's not an issue. It's once you get to like going to level 60 on these things that it becomes super expensive and you just don't have the resources. Onto the longbow. I actually like the longbow. I think it's quite decent. It's very similar in feel to me as the West Wind, but doesn't have quite the damage potential. Also, the thing I want to note about it is that there is a lot of light, weak enemies in the campaign, like you mentioned, like the Huntsman is so good for. Mm-hmm. So as a free-to-play option, if you are struggling in the campaign, it's not a bad one to try and tech in.
Yeah, real quick, never salvage any SR weapons, okay? I think I need to mention this, but all these SR weapons all have a pretty good value, and especially these. I think, like, unfortunately for me, right, I do a bunch of pulls and it's like, okay, I need weapon enhancement, and then I can't get any besides salvaging early game. And then I lose my ability to use Orb of Avarice, West Wind, Longbow until like a bit later, which are all really good weapons. But like this Longbow, I think, works well. I feel like once you're able to stun with it, it does get a lot better. But I'm telling you, Chapter 8, I mean, just looking at how the soft launch went, you're going to need a lot of light weapons and like hunters to use.
Yeah, dude,
Chapter 8.
I did Chapter 8 with... I had Plum, though. I had Plum, and that was like my lifesaver. But, dude, that fight, sure. I had to min-max the absolute living shit out of that fight to get it done in time. It was insane. Next one, the Scythe. What's your thoughts on the Scythe?
I don't really use it much because I have Plum and the dagger. But because you could get it to dupe 1, I think it's really good. Like, immediately, you consider this a dupe 1 weapon, right? So I think it does have that edge over a lot of other weapons. And, I mean,
especially
you have good damage from it. Oh, yeah. You have good damage from it. And then also, you get the crit rate increase, which is really good at dupe 1, obviously. So I think it's good. Now, you do lose a bit of HP, but it's not enough to really consider it in this.
And the thing with that one is, if you want to compare it and Plum's like a universal weapon that's great for single target, great for AoE. The Scythe is kind of just AoE specific. Mm-hmm. It lacks the single target.
That's fine.
Capacity. And that's
there's
kind
a lot of instances where you're going to need still AoE. So like having it's not bad.
Oh, 100%. But that's just like the TLDR breakdown on the two dark SSR weapons. And then Moonshadow is the one that buffs it. So if you've got like, if we get some endgame mode that's like heavy AoE dark weakness, like Moonshadow and Shadow Scythe is going to be huge for that. But in general, Plum is just the safe go-to dark weapon. Let's jump into this next tier because I want to cover Vulcan's Rage. Get your thoughts on that. Find out what you think about these two water weapons because they are the only two other, like we haven't seen any other water weapons besides the grimoire until this point, and then we'll just sort of speed run through the rest because we're getting a bit low on the tier list.
Yeah. Okay.
So kick it off with
for
Vulcan's.
The water weapons. Which one?
Kick it off with Vulcan's Rage and finish the last SSR.
It's honestly one that I just like get confused by. Like, it seemed like on paper it doesn't seem too bad. But I feel like the ones that try to take more of a defensive approach and it just doesn't work usually from what we're seeing. Like the longsword's good enough, but it's just not exactly like the top tier because I think it's focusing more on defense. And you could get like decent damage from the Vulcan, but I'd say maybe not enough.
And that's what I find in this game is as soon as you start adding utility, being control, buffing, anything else to anything in the game, it starts sacrificing damage. For instance, like you mentioned, like the Longbow gets some control into it.
Yeah.
But it loses out on damage to things like the West Wind, which is purely DPS focused. And so these ones that provide survivability or tanky type aspects, like the Longsword, they lose out on damage, but they don't offer anything like the Moonshadow does or the Grimoire does in terms of the buffing capabilities that they provide. So it's like that's the general vibe I'm getting from the game myself. Are you sort of similar?
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I mean, stunning's great, but it's also just there's ways to work around not needing to stun, right? Like that 4-second stun's great, but you could also just dodge, right? Like that's kind of the approach like that I'm kind of understanding.
Yeah.
So having these types of utilities is great, but not something that makes it necessary.
And just to counter what some people are probably thinking right now when we said with the Grimoire, how it's got this 4-second stun and it's amazing. It's the combo of locking everything in place and then being able to do as much damage and amplify the damage of everything. That is where its combo comes into play, and that's where the stun is super clutch on it. But yeah, I just wanted to bring that up before anyone tried to counteract that argument.
Yeah.
All right, and then jump into the two waters.
I mean, okay. I feel like Kasaka's Fang. Okay, wait. I'm just gonna make sure that's the right one. Yeah. That's the one with the bleed, or yes, yes.
I believe
That would have
so.
been. That would have been, I think, S tier. If it wasn't for the world boss not being able to be bled,
Yeah.
because bleed, the bleed of how it works is the HP bleed. HP bleed is very good against world boss because it has like so
So
much
much.
HP. So you're doing 0.8% HP of every 3 seconds. That's like a lot of damage. But because it's against like smaller bosses, 0.8% HP every 3 seconds that you're doing when it does bleed is not as crazy, but it still has its value. Like bleed, especially we see with the Kangtai Shik, is insanely good, right? Like it makes an A
Yep.
unit competitive with the 3 dark rank SSRs, right? So I definitely think that there is a place for Kasaka's, but it's just that gap between it and Thetis, like how much Thetis offers from AoE and single target damage, stun and extra damage. That, I mean, you could run this. I'm pretty sure this weapon you get for free. It's been a while since I started an account, but I think it's
Yes.
for free. If I
You
Okay.
start using it pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah, it's that weapon you start with. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it's honestly not bad. And if ever there's like big bosses, I know there's the other mode where it shows Vulcan on like the game mode image.
Yep.
That's
Yeah,
grayed
yeah.
out. Pretty sure that one might make good use out of it if that boss has like high HP. And also it's fire, so maybe Kasaka is gonna get like big buffs from that. So we'll have to see for that.
Yeah, and
think it's
like,
good.
and maybe endgame at the moment currently, because our only water basically weapon is the grimoire,
Yeah.
which isn't really a damage focused weapon. If you want to go all in end game on damage for water, then these are your two options that you're looking
Mm-hmm.
at. Once again, though, that is more of a whale thing slash a lot more time played in the game before you
For
look
sure.
to those things, and by that time we may have another water weapon damage
We probably
focused.
will. Yeah.
It's kind of crazy that we've got 3 darks. I couldn't believe when they put Moon
It's
Shadow
so
into the
weird.
game after we already
Yeah.
had 2 darks, and then we get another one, and everything else is still at 1 SSR. So
Mm-hmm.
hopefully they start balancing that shit out. But what about the Naga?
Honestly, Naga is like okay. I mean, I don't have much play with it. I just like decided to watch videos, see like what people thought about it. It seems decent. I feel Kasaka's for me has a bit of an edge. I like bleed. Okay, so I think there's definitely that. But the damage it offers, like the explosions, is not horrible, right?
Yeah.
I think maybe it's more of a duped out weapon that will be kinda better. But I feel like A is like an okay placement for it.
Yeah, and that's fair. And that's pretty much... I don't want to jump into anything else down here unless you have something profound to say about them. But
Looking at it, not really.
yeah. So the one thing I wanted to highlight at the end of this one is, once again, the resources you have, especially as free-to-play, is super limited. So
Yeah.
don't go rushing to level everything up. Like, leveling stuff to 20, fine in the early game. Going to, like, 40 and 60, and especially 80... You just ain't going to do it, especially when you're trying to level up hunters as well, which also cost gold. The game has a massive gold issue.
Oh my God, yeah.
So at least, like, try and land a west win. Obviously, like, you can't really try, but I would always
Yeah.
recommend starting the game with 2 weapons on your wish list to try and land one of them. Also,
Yep.
you want hunters on your wish list because you kind of want to balance out your account.
A good 2-2 split, I think, would be good. Like 2 hunters, 2 weapons.
Yeah,
Hope you get lucky.
and so my approach is Plum and Grimoire on the wish list, and then
Yeah.
if you don't get them, if you happen to get a West Wind, perfect. You can
GG.
pretty freely
Lovely.
invest into that without feeling
Yeah.
guilty about it. If you don't get that, then you've also got the Orb, which would be the kind of the
Yeah.
next one I would look to invest in, because if you do invest into the Longbow, you can
Yeah.
then possibly get the Huntsman, and that's kind of buckle up.
I think
but-
that's fair, but also the longbow, the thing about it is if you invest into that, maybe like level 30, 40, at least for the Igris fight, you're set. And I think that
True.
is the big thing for people. That was the first block. So being able to
Yeah.
get past that quick, being able to get past your server, maybe get higher in the rankings because of certain things, could be a lot better for people.
That's
so I
actually
think
a
early
really
game,
good point. Yeah.
like early game longbow, I'd say great. After chapter 8, maybe don't look at it. I
Yeah,
think after
I-
chapter 8, you stop investing.
Yeah, that is actually a fantastic point. Like I was using Plum against Igris, and
Yeah.
I honestly feel like if I just invested into the Longbow, it would have been an easier fight.
For sure.
It does make a massive difference. But yeah, West Wind's your safest investment. I feel like that's a great recommendation for the longbow. Do it until Igris, and then you can drop it, or the orb. But keep in mind, eventually, I think it's only like a couple days after I beat Igris, I think it was, that I got the Shadow Scythe, and that's your next free weapon. And if you don't have anything else by that point, you can run West Wind and Shadow Scythe and be pretty safe. But like my dream free to play playthrough 2 weapons would be the Plum and the Grimoire. I think they're just 2 fantastic weapons. But once again, if you do get the Huntsman, that's not a bad one to bring into the campaign fights to that
Huntsman
level 40 type range.
For sure. Huntsman, I've never had a point so far that I found it was not useful. And I think, okay, the thing is for me, it's the only weapon I'm pulling. I have 4 dupes in it. None of my other weapons have
that's
dupes.
the other thing. Dupes do impact your decision on what to use as well, if you get them.
Yeah, for sure. But I think another thing that people like need to kind of be aware of, especially for I think fire and wind, I think are the 2 big ones, is that they're probably netmarble probably knows like the next weapons they should release.
Yeah.
I don't know what the dagger was, so maybe I'm wrong about that, because the dagger I think was the worst choice they could have made for the first SSR weapon they released.
It's so stupid.
It doesn't make sense. Especially one's free, the other one's best in the game. Anyway, we're probably gonna get a fire weapon next. And that's gonna go on that's gonna go in the custom banner, right? Everything for like weapons and like old hunters all goes on the custom banner. So we could expect that probably the next fire is gonna be good if they see that not many people are using any other fire weapon.
Yeah, I mean it's an easy sell.
Keep out for that. Yeah, I definitely think.
Plus, they'll probably introduce some boss that's weak to fire, and then the perfect upsell. You know how these games are.
Of course.
But,
I mean, they have the Lycan. Lycan's half, because it's half water, half fire.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you wanted to cover on weapons while we're here?
Not really. Just please, again, don't salvage any SRs. We never know if an SR just becomes way better. And we just saw the Westwind get nerfed, so it's very possible they buff other weapons to become just so busted, right? It seems like they want to do this every once in a while, so just expect to maybe want to use an SR weapon that you didn't want to previously in the future. And just always be wary with your weapon enhancements. Make sure you always make your mana, the what's it called? The mining. Always do your mining. Always get your weapon enhancements that you can from it daily. And you should be good with weapons.
Sick. Anyway, dude, as always, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. We'll get you on again in the future. I've got this spurt where I'm just loving doing collabs, and I'm just doing them on all my channels. It's just a way more enjoyable way to make content. So
it is. Especially for
once again, guys, go show Giku some love. Dude's an absolute legend. You're young, but very mature in the content creation space, which is very rare to see when you've got grandpas like me and Painblade in here doing shit as well.
Yeah.
But once again, guys, shout out to Giku. Go show him some love. As always, thanks for watching. Hope you have an awesome day. We'll look forward to seeing the next one. Cheers.